Okay, good morning and welcome to Sunday Story Hour, where we share real life stories of how human design has helped people tell a richer, more empowered story of who they really are. I'm Kathy Bachanko, and my guest this week is Leslie Arboleda. Did I say that right, Leslie?
Arboleda. My Colombian husband says Arboleda, but you can say it any way you want.
Oh, I can't really know like that, but I think that I would like to hear him say that. Anyway, she is a 3/5 emotional manifesting generator, and I'm really excited for this conversation today. I met Leslie at conference. Leslie actually lives right near there in Colorado Springs, and so we connected at a book signing actually at conference. I remember chatting at the table. We were just talking about that, and so Leslie is in typical manifesting generator fashion, aware of many hats. She does all the things, all the modalities, all at one time. And she's also a 3/5. So if you know the third line, she is doing things, some of them don't work, and everybody expects her to save them because she's a fifth line. So this is going to be an exciting, very interesting story. And I'd like Leslie to tell us a little bit about herself, and however you want to go into, if you want to start with, how about if you start with how you found human design? Does that sound correct?
Okay. And I just want to say, I feel very seen right now. So thank you. Human design first found me in 2007. Astrology is my first language of self-understanding. When I found the lens of energetics and how it intersects with our meat suit, as I like to refer to it, it really it kind of made me feel seen in a way that I didn't even know I felt unseen before. So one might think that human design took it to the next level, but the truth is, when human design first found me in 2007, the person that was my access point for human design was a big sacral and I didn't know what that was at the time, but I definitely know what it is now, and can see how it took me 10 more years to really find my own alignment with the system. I didn't in 2007, I didn't know about chakras. I didn't really understand really how the astrology worked as far as inside of my own personal life. And I certainly had no frame of reference for the I Ching or the Judaic Kabbalah. So interestingly, I kind of put a pin in it and really never really thought about it again. And then over the course of the next decade, I grew really profoundly personally aware of how powerful it is to understand yourself on an energetic level. Took a yoga training, learned about the chakras, et cetera, et cetera. And so when this sort of how I'm hardwired, but when I understand all the pieces, all of a sudden the whole came back together for me. So in 2017, I was in a group of women that I really loved, unlike the woman that first introduced it to me. And someone asked about it, and I was like, oh, I think I know something about it. And when I pulled up the body graph for the second time, it just completely landed. And I was like, oh, look, I'm still getting goosies when I tell the story. It really made sense. It helps me. And the way I explain it to people now is human design is what helps me bring the astrology out of the sky and into my own body, and then into my relationships. And I think it's all about relationships. So if you understand your energetics, and then you understand how you commingle your energy with the people you're in relationship with, I'm a believer that the human experience can be far more joyful.
I love that. I love that. It takes astrology out of the sky and into your body and into our relationships. That's really beautiful. And it's funny how you bring up the fact that an incorrect relationship introduced you to it and your whole body rejected it. Or maybe it was probably a combination of the timing being incorrect and but maybe you needed that early introduction to have that extra resonance with it later, right?
I'm a big believer in planting seeds. And at 47, I have no attachment to what takes roots. And I believe other people are doing the same thing. So I definitely think I needed that 2007 point of historical reference to be like, oh yeah, I know what that is, when I saw it in 2017. But yes, I'm very clear that right people, right place, right time is actually the magic equation. And
Yeah.
younger Leslie tried to force herself in a lot of situations with her conscious gate 51, and just we'll see what happens.
The gate of shock in
Yes.
traditional human design, right?
My 8-year-old shares the same incarnation cross with me, and I explain him I say he's a provocative young fella. So I will say
Yeah,
I was a provocative young gal.
I bet. I can sense that in you, just even in your 47-year-old version. So how old's your son?
8,
8.
that
Okay.
one.
I knew you have 3.
I have 3. Yeah, he has an
Boys.
11-year-old brother and a 14-year-old sister too. So I'm in
Yeah.
the thick of it, as they say.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're a busy, good thing you're a time bender, right?
Thank goodness I'm wired that way.
Right. Okay. So I just realized I didn't have your chart up. Silly me. Okay. So yeah, the 51 in the third line. That's interesting. So, all right. So you were talking about your story. So you saw the chart again this next time and you went, ooh, and then
It made total sense. And then as I started to learn about the system of human design and really, the traditional language and where we're focusing on who we are and who we aren't, I was at the right age of I'm rounding the corner on my second Saturn return, and definitely felt that loop on the first round. And so looking at the body graph and really being able to understand what are my personal strengths, right? What are my superpowers? And then also, how do I access that stuff that are my challenges or my growth opportunities, right? Because I have a conscious sun in my gate 51, but I have an open will center. So there's a lot of this whole, like, how do I prove my value sort of thing? And being really clear on what I bring to the table makes it so much easier to be certain on what value I really bring to every interaction I have. And like I said, it all boils down to relationship. My education is psychology degrees over and over, and including an MBA in marketing, because that's really just the psychology of marketing, right? Like, and so I think it's really important for us to understand ourselves, but then also be really clear that we're just not that important. This planet's kept spinning the minute we were born. And so what we understand about ourselves is only a part of every single interaction we're having in life. You've got to be powerfully informed, but then also you have to, make a choice and do it on purpose, I think. Lots of people live and die living accidentally, never understanding truly where their aligned places are, who their aligned people are, when the aligned time is, like you said. There's 3 parts to that magical experience.
yeah. And I noticed that you also have that same gate 51 in your unconscious, your design Jupiter.
Mm-hmm. That's
So,
not lost on me either.
well, what's interesting is that's my design Jupiter. I don't remember if that's the same line. Let me look my charts right here. I do know the gates, but for some reason I'm blanking. No, I'm 51.5 is my design Jupiter. So that's interesting, because I'm just starting to get into learning more about the gene keys. And I know that has a lot to do with, that's your pearl, right? Isn't that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Life purpose from the gene keys perspective. And then from a sacred astronomy perspective, if you think about those styrofoam ball models we made in 3rd grade, right? The sun is the thing around which the earth is revolving. So our sun energy is the thing around which our life is revolving. But understanding these other essences of how are we expanding? How are we intuitively tapped in? How are we creating space for desire? How are we going after what we desire, right? But the planetary expressions of those things come out in all of us. And if you don't like the woo-woo words of Mercury's in retrograde and recalibrate how you communicate, take what works and leave the rest. But I put a lot out there because I think, again, the seeds that take root are absolutely the ones that are supposed to. And, in case it's not clear, the rest of it's not my people, not my problem.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting.
With the most compassion, of course.
Right. So, I want to talk. So I have so many things that, picking which one's coming in here, right? Because part of me wants to say, okay, so this is your Jupiter, which is the largest planet. It expands everything it touches. And it's your sun, right? Same energy, right? It's both. That's on your open will center. So this understanding yourself through the lens of that in human design is like, it's really it's a lot of initiating energy. I mean, we always talk about the gate 51 is this shocking thing, but it's initiating energy. It's about, and it points towards the G center, and it points towards this gate of the spirit, this gate 25. So it really is this like, can you know your worth in this way that allows you to just be the bold, expressive, initiating, shocking Leslie that you are here to be, right? Can you really embrace that and amplify all of this stuff, right? So then you're also a third line and a fifth line and all this, that's a lot of.
It's kind of like a lot of firecrackers, Kathy.
Yeah, isn't that exciting? A lot of people really pay a lot of money to go watch fireworks, right?
For sure. And I have an uncle who lost a finger with one too. So be clear.
Right, exactly. It can be dangerous, right? So, so I wanted to say that, but I really wanted to spend a lot of our time talking about, since you have such a strong background in astrology and you work with relationships, and right now Venus is in retrograde, and I just know from some things we've talked about, being a 3-5, you've got the third line is all about bonds made and broken. So there's a lot of relationship dynamics, all of this together. I just really am curious what, if you would like to start out by talking about relationships now.
Sure. I think that was, again, one of the things that really helped me understand why I got a hair there, why I wanted to share human design with other people, right? Like astrology was really life-changing for me personally, but unless someone really wants to BS over the stars, I was never really called to go out and help people understand themselves through that lens. I felt very differently about human design. I think everyone needs to have this lens of self-understanding so that when they go mix and mingle their energies, they not only are they doing it on purpose to create the joyful, healthy experience we're all entitled to, but they're also aware of when they have a moment of humanity and can I say SHIT on your podcast? When things go right, when shit goes south, right?
Right.
You really want to also understand like what happened. How did that happen? How did the breakdown occur? And how can we recalibrate, right? That's realign or recalibrate are sort of the things that I love to do in our practice together with my clients, because it's not about learning something new. First of all, I don't magnetize dummies. So there's that. But also, we don't need anything extra than what we already have. And as a culture and as I think a whole global population right now, collectively, we've forgotten not only are we enough, but we're so divinely, infinitely perfect that like there's nothing that needs to change except our relationship to how divinely perfect we are, right?
Yes.
And that's really where the human design and the relationship part comes in, is because I'm of the opinion, based on my experience and my personally and professionally, frankly, that every relationship breakdown is the result of misinformation or a misunderstanding, right? Like there's very few things that happen in life when both parties are totally clear and in alignment. And so to bring it back to that astrology aspect, right? Like right now we're dealing with that Venus retrograde experience. Venus is the energy of desire, but creating the space for it, right? Being receptive to that which we desire. Retrograde periods get a bad rap because pop culture and Mercury retrograde, right? But a retrograde period, again, from a sacred astronomy perspective, isn't a planet going backwards. It's when the planet appears to be going backwards from an Earth perspective, from a geocentric perspective, but it's actually when the planet's coming at us. right? So when planets are not in retrograde, we're all moving in the same direction. When a planet is in retrograde, Earth is moving forward and that other planet is coming at us on an earthly perspective, right? So it's an opportunity to reevaluate your relationship with the energy. Are you upstream or are you downstream? When you're floating down the river in Golden, you want to be clear on which direction you're ultimately heading. I think the same is true in life. And so when we can really tap into how are we creating the space for what we are resonating is our desire, right? And if there's misalignment, usually it's because we think we want something different than we are energetically creating the space for. And so this retrograde in particular, just to add the layer, right, it's happening in Leo. So Leo is that fixed fire energy that happens in the earth. It's sustained flow of action. It's, I'm going to do what I'm going to do because I like it and it makes me feel good kind of thing, right? And I happen to be a Leo rising. So all of this is happening in my first house of self. So I'm having this whole kind of, I won't call it midlife crisis, but definitely an existential experience of how have I created the space for what I thought I desired, or how have I filled the space for what I thought I desired with what I actually energetically was magnetizing. And it's been a beautiful crisis for sure. At the peak of the retrograde, I was like, oh my Lord, my entire life is about to shift in ways I've never even imagined. And then because I'm also really mindful of how my energy works and how my energy commingles with my partners, my family, people in my life, I really was able to mindfully take a step back and be like, okay, if this is the goal I want to have, totally inside my circle of control, and this is the energy I'm commingling with right now, completely outside my circle of control, how do I focus on the thing that is actually inside my control? And so I really mindfully refocused on the goal of, in particular, I'm talking about my partnership, but also in my business. I noticed it after you and I talked. I was like, oh, that same thing happened professionally. Interesting. And so it's this last few weeks of like, it's coming to its peak, but it's been such a, like I said, beautiful chaos to just know I have not just jumped into the smooth water where I can float down on my little $3 inner tube, but I accidentally jumped straight into some class 5 rapids and is my life jacket fastened, right? Feet up and use your skills. And then when you get to where you can put your feet down again, you know, in this analogy, I'm going to feel completely refreshed and on the other side of the river. So I think when we can, again, to bring it back to our human design, I think when we can really understand what's happening around us, right, the universal energies, and then how is our meat suit antenna picking up that energy? What are we receiving, right? And then how do I want to broadcast it? Because I'm not really in charge of what I'm receiving. That comes back to my blueprint, right? That comes back to my hardwiring. I'm not really in charge of the transit energy because I'm really just not that special and the planets kept spinning. But I'm totally got this burdensome gift of free will and choice inside my human body. So what kind of experience do I want to create? And I think that's really what attracted me to Karen and quantum human design is the relanguaging of the system and being clear that, yeah, I totally have some opportunities for improvement. There's programming, there's conditioning, there's a whole bunch of junk in my closets still. But also, if I know where the better version of me is, I can walk into that with so much more authority. I named my business Kaizen Wellness. Kaizen is a Japanese concept of continuous improvement from a place of current success. And a lot of times people are really triggered when they hear the better part, right? Like a lot of people have a story that if they could be better, that implies that they're not good enough already. And I love to have that conversation with people because that last part of the qualifier, from a place of current success, is the thing that really fired me up about the whole concept. We can be beautifully aligned, divinely, perfectly executing life, and still have access to greater joy and more ease. We can still be doing us better. And not because we're not doing us great right now, but understanding again, what is more ease, more joy? How does that look like for you? What does that look like for me? Maybe it's an aligned choice and we can go do the same thing joyfully together, but maybe not. And making people wrong because their joyful thing is not your joyful thing, I think, again, is a lot of the fundamental issues with the breakdowns that we have in our relationships. I don't
Yeah.
have to appreciate what you find joyful to know that that is what makes you joyful. I can totally appreciate it for that.
I use the analogy of peach ice cream, right? Because peach ice cream is very specific. And personally, the first time I had like really good peach ice cream, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But there are some people, you could give them the best peach ice cream on the face of the planet, and they would be like, oh no, right? Because that's not their flavor. That's not what they like. Or like now I really can't eat it because I'll be like, no, I can't. I'm sure it's really good, but I'm going to have a headache because I don't do well with dairy or whatever. But that doesn't mean that that peach ice cream isn't amazing. And we wind up with a world of vanilla ice cream because people are afraid to be the best moose track ice cream or, peanut butter, whatever, that somebody out there thinks is the best thing that ever. And it makes the world so much more interesting, right? But there's going to be people who go, ew, yuck, right? I recently posted a thing that said, what food were you traumatized by? I don't know if you saw that post. It was just not human design related. It was just a fun thing. And I told the story of when I came home as a young girl, just in time to see, if you ever seen meat that's been cooked in a pressure cooker and not browned, it's not attractive no matter what it is. My mom had made a cow's tongue. She was going to slice it up and hide it in some recipe, but I came home just in time to see a gray cow's tongue. I was traumatized. I cried at dinner. I cried literally. And yet people are telling me where it says, what were they traumatized? They're saying things like pork chops or hamburger helper. And I'm like, okay, those are things you might not have liked, but tell me how that was traumatized. You know what I mean? Like, so we all have our stories is what I'm saying. And
Sure.
I'm digressing from what you were talking about. Ooh. Okay. But my point is, really knowing that we are meant to be our own version of peach ice cream or whatever it is. And we create these stories in our mind that tell us we're not good enough because someone doesn't like peach ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that's something that when human design can tell us, you're meant to be peach ice cream, then you can clearly say, the hell with you for not liking peach ice cream, right? It just kind of gives, right? I feel like that gives a lot of people.
There's power in that freedom if you're willing to embrace it. It's like those old posters from the 90s that had all the fractals, the same smaller piece over and over and over again. We're not here to be every person for all 8 billion people on the planet. That shit would be overwhelming and we'd all burn out immediately. We're here to be in the right people, with the right people at the right place at the right time. And that means being clear that there's a whole bunch of people that won't entail, that won't include. And so if you're a peach ice cream lover, awesome. If you're the only peach ice cream lover on the whole planet, awesome. If you're part of a great club of thousands of peach loving ice cream eaters,
Right.
awesome, right?
Right.
Like, I think the divisive, experiences we have as human beings comes back to that binary us and them, black and white, right? The yin and yang is a great image, but it's really kind of, I'm on an interview, thank you. It's really kind of inaccurate when you think about the visual of it, because at some point the white turns into the black very dramatically, when in life, there's very few experiences that have that very clear boundary about what is right, what is wrong, what is aligned, what is not, right? Like what was right for me at 20, so not right for me at 47. What's right for me at 47 really would not have felt good for me at 20, right? So being clear, my blueprint hasn't changed, but every way I commingle my energy with the people and the time and my life, that's always changing. And that can either be really freeing, right? Real freedom in that, or that can be really overwhelming. I have an open spleen. Some people tell me I'm supposed to be afraid of the unknown, but
Supposed to be a what?
I said I have an open spleen. I hear I'm supposed to be afraid of the unknown, but there's been a lot of work that really comes with understanding that all of it's unknown. Like,
Right.
right. So what makes you feel joyful? Back to, what Karen says, right? Like, joy is our birthright. So when you're not feeling joy, it's not because you're doing life wrong, but you are making misaligned choices that could be corrected and put you in a more joyful place. And I'm going to love you if you make shitty choices or crappy choices that make you feel crappy. I'm going to love you if you make aligned choices that make you feel joyful, because those things aren't tethered for me. And as a coach, I think that can be really empowering to be like, look, I got no emotional skin in this game, but I could see very clearly how you could feel happier. Would you like to go there with me? And people who don't want to go there with me, like you said, people who aren't interested, they're not my people. I don't take that personally.
Yeah, and they can be great people, right?
Right. And they'll find their people who are not me, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I wish that for them, frankly.
Right. We all benefit when they find their people and, that take them to the next level. So I want to talk a little bit about the third line in relationship and that whole bonds made and broken thing, because you've been talking a lot about just in general, like learning things that don't work and experiences and success and that sort of thing. But my understanding with the third line, especially the third line personality, is that your greatest lessons come from things not working. So how that works in relationships, especially, is difficult, right?
It can be. I am this weird combination of naively and aware person, because I am so unfiltered and I just kind of am what I am. It sometimes takes me a little time to pick up that other people are saying something that isn't totally accurate, or they don't mean what they say or say what they mean. And I just own it at nearly 50. I'm easy to fool sometimes. But I also am really clear that even those opportunities where I feel like I messed up or someone fooled me, I learned from them, right? Like, I have been celebrating my mistakes my whole life. I just only learned that that was actually an aligned way of being for me in the last decade or so, right? Like, I really don't struggle with that whole I messed up, I'm a bad person conversation, because as I understand it, I'm just hardwired that way. Like, there really aren't mistakes. There are unexpected outcomes that can definitely have some really negative consequences, for sure. So please don't hear me say, there's nothing wrong with my life. I mess up a lot, but each time I mess up is an opportunity for me to shift it into some kind of feedback, so that next time I probably will mess up differently, but I'm not likely to mess up the same way. In relationships, the same is true. And again, only in reflection am I able to see it so clearly. But I was friends with every ex-boyfriend I had because it never occurred to me that they needed to be like well, most of them, and then never have anything to do with them pile, because it was just a matter of, this isn't the right place, the right people, the right time. And so I think that bonds made and broken thing can sometimes be misinterpreted like we're fickle, or like we don't stick around. But I think really what it is what we're doing is trying on all these different ways of relating with people. And or at least that's my experience, right? Are we friends? Are we romantic? Are we professional? Are we acquaintances? Are we social? Do we hate each other? Do I never want to see you in a room again because I'm not that enlightened yet, right? Like, all of those different bonds, right? Even the ones that don't make us feel warm and fuzzy, those are worth trying on. And I think there's real value in understanding them. Right? You got to know what you don't want in order to know what you do want.
Yeah.
And as human beings, it's way easier to access what we don't want. So why not use that? Why not tap into that natural part of being a human being, is that we're going to bump up against a bunch of stuff that isn't correct for us. We can make ourselves wrong. We can compare ourselves with people who aren't seemingly doing it that way. Or we can just be okay that some of us are hardwired to bump up on a whole bunch of wrong stuff, and what can we learn in the process, right? Like I said at the beginning, like, let's see what happens. I have never, that has not been conditioned out of me. And I'm so grateful for it, because it's, especially in my middle age here, it's one of my greatest personal gifts and also superpowers that I can offer the collective. I think when we really fully embrace who we are on a profile level, on an energetic level, on a, connection level, we're serving the collective. And that's really what we're here to do. Make the world a better place. I know my husband calls me a spiritual Pollyanna sometime, but I'm here to make the world a better place. I have given the world 3 more people that I hope will also make the world a better place. It's been my goal for quite some time. I would like the world to be better in my path. I don't know if the entire globe will be approved, but there's a whole bunch of people who are better for having crossed paths with me. And I know that part of that is because I have done a whole bunch of things well, and I've done a whole bunch of things totally wrong, completely ass backwards and upside down.
Well, I think that it's, it's tricky because, we use all these negative words like done things totally wrong, made mistakes or whatever. But, the third line, okay, so I'm really drawn. I have a lot of 3 5s in my life. I've been told that the lines of our nodes in human design are the profiles we're most meant to interact with. And I have 3rd line and 5th line nodes. So, and I notice you have 6-2 and I'm a 6-2, and I think your husband's a 6-2, right?
I love that you just said that.
So, anyway, it's just kind of funny. So, but what I've noticed with the 3rd line, because I have a lot of 5th lines in my life too, just in general, and a lot of 3rd lines. So it's not that I just attract the 3 5s, but I have a lot of both of those. So, but with the 3 5 specifically, I find that I really have to let them lead to a certain extent as far as the level of connection, because they have to consistently reevaluate what's working. And that's where the bonds get really broken, is when somebody has a situation where they're like, oh, I don't like how this happened with Kathy, and I need to pull back. And there's the old me who used to need to fix everything, and I needed that recognition, and I needed to be like, oh no, where now, I used to continually try to repair that bond. But if you don't let the bond really sit and be broken until the 3rd line person is ready to, and now I'm thinking that might be because as a 6th line, I was that ineffective 3rd line for the first part of my life, right?
That's where I was like, oh, you're totally resonating with
So
it.
I was trying to be the one fixing the bonds, but I'm not a 3rd line, I'm a 6th line. And I need to allow the person who felt the bond was broken
to re-navigate,
to wait and re-navigate, and to trust that I am enough. I am not, there's not something wrong with me. I may have done something they didn't like that maybe even I regret, and I will apologize and I will whatever. But if that person is not ready to re-enter into relationship in a way that feels correct, that's on them. And that's not a reflection of my value. That's a reflection of their boundaries and where they're at in their life. And you're nodding, so I'm assuming that I'm kind of asking, does this resonate? Is this how you feel?
It makes a lot of sense. And I think also too, the 3 5 in particular, right? We're walking around with this karmic mirror while we're screwing up on the backside of it, or we're making mistakes, right? We're not having expected results, whatever verbiage you want to use. But we're also never really being fully seen for who we are behind the mirror as the 3 line. And I think at some point in, I don't know what part of the quantum human design training it was, but Karen talked about how you really need to fully embrace the personality line before you can understand how to navigate life with the design line. And so I feel like I've always kind of, we talk about the design side is how other people see you, and the personality side is how you very much see yourself. And so I think I've sort of always understood that 3 line, so what that we didn't get the result we wanted, let's figure out what we did get kind of thing. But I didn't fully appreciate how unseen I felt on a total level, right? Like I felt like people were always seeing either my successes or my failures, but there's so much more to a 3 line than just doing it well or doing it wrong, right? And so I think that 5 line burden, sometimes as they call it too, like I've never really been seen behind the mirror, has been a really cool conversation for me to have as a personal inquiry, because there's a mirror on my side too. I'm holding up this karmic mirror for the collective, but I'm also holding it up for myself. And so being able, again, I started and then we spiderweb someplace else. The quantum language of being able to fully embrace who I am in alignment with myself makes it so much easier to be successful, to have failures, to feel like no one else really knows the real me, because I know the real me, and I know that the real me is meant to do things really well and also do things in a really unexpected way. And so I think it's that bonds made and broken thing, that, just to bring it back to your question, the bonds made and broken thing has been really powerful in relationship with people, but also in my own understanding of my relationship with myself. Because I think that's a part of the 3 line that doesn't get talked about a lot, especially with the 3-5, is we have a lot of bonds made and broken with ourselves. We have a lot of opportunities to recreate our own self-perception, because as a 5 line, nobody else is really going to be able to connect with us in a way to give us that sounding board or that feedback. But I think I do it in my relationships with people.
So for those of you who might be watching this and thinking we're talking another language, because, you know, we kind of are, but, you know, we're both, you know, pretty far into our experiments here. So we're just throwing around these things. But the 5th line is known as the karmic mirror because it draws people to them in a way that shows them what they need, right? So people will sometimes be drawn, and then what you need is always within you, right? So, but if you're not ready for it and you're drawn to somebody, you can project on them that they're going to save you. And when they don't, because you need to save yourself, when they don't, then they're the heretic. So they're either the cause of all your problems or the source of all your relief, right?
Right.
So, you know, to just explain a little bit about that whole 5th line. So, I think that the 3-5 is, and I don't want to say, I hesitate to say that it's hard, because everything is what it's meant to be. And I believe we picked our design. We picked everything about the dynamics of what we're entering into this life with. Who we pick our parents. That's my belief. We pick our parents. We pick our the time we're born. We're, you know, is all done by our soul, in my opinion. And that's my current belief. That could change tomorrow. I have an open ajna. I'm willing to say that I'm not certain of anything. But so don't argue with me why I'm wrong, because
Don't tell me what I said yesterday.
right, exactly. I'm willing to be surprised by what my mind has yet to discover or imagine.
Before we change directions, on that note right there, I think it's also really powerful to understand that if people are rejecting a 5 line, what they're rejecting is what they're seeing in themselves they're just not ready for.
Right.
And so I've never really took it. I was never aware that I was taking that rejection personally. Younger me was like, if you don't like it, your problem, not mine, right? Combat boots and angst was kind of how my adolescence was themed.
Right.
In reflection, I definitely believed that at the time, but it was because there was a lot of hiding in the shadows I wasn't aware of. I can see now how part of what that defense mechanism was, if you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine, was already a reaction to that organic feeling of rejection that comes with a 5 line. Because again, people take rejection personally, and it's just not. It's like one magnet, 2 south-facing magnets taking it personally that they can't stick together. It's not personal. And we take it so personally sometimes.
Ooh, that's a great analogy, because when we're talking about relationships and the energy, I feel like human design gives you the ability to say, why are we not sticking together? Why are we not sticking together? And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, because I just need to turn around.
Yes, because
right?
my low frequency and your low frequency are repelling each other. That's it.
Right. And you can see where there's a simple reframe, right? Because most of our problems are all in our mind, right? It doesn't mean that the circumstances are not true, but the story we create with them, with our partner, you know, for me to understand that I spent, you know, I've been married for 27.5 years, right? We've been together 30 years. And I spent the majority of it trying to impose some sort of impact on him that was going to change certain things about him that I then see now are who he's here to be. Right? Yes, he has some shadow aspects of that show, but I have shadow aspects of my design that are still there. And I can't, and I want him to love me, shadows and all. I have to love
Including
him,
those.
shadows and all, right?
Mhm.
So the lack of his fixing the shadows is not part of my story. My shadows, then dealing with that's my story. So when you can take that and reframe the relationship through the seeing where our, I think you and I were talking before about compromise channels and things like that, where our energy compromises the other. Well, we can't change that. That's the dynamics. But changing the story we associate with how we feel is completely transformative. And that's one of the beautiful things about, understanding our relationship through human design. And I feel like now this Venus retrograde has kind of had me looking at, oh yeah, you fixed all these parts over here. And I know fixed isn't the right word. You learned how to navigate all these parts of your relationship in a way that reframe them in a more positive and empowering narrative for your relationship. But here we're going to show you during this Venus retrograde the little bits that fell to the wayside that you're still resenting and creating negative stories about, and da da da. And so
We can create space for that which fills the whole of what we desire, but
right?
it's not the thing, right? It's like that Shel Silverstein story of the missing piece meets the big O or whatever.
Oh, I love that one.
Right? Like there's this whole idea of finding your missing piece, but there's also this real freedom and understanding that you're complete and whole all by yourself. And so those levels of self-understanding and then those levels of relationship with those self-understanding, it's game changing. It's life changing. It truly is. I say the phrase, and I know as soon as I say it, people stop listening because they think it can't be, right? But it truly is. This way of being able to give yourself grace and space to be exactly who you are, and then also who you are in relationship with that person and that person and that person, because it's a very unique experience every single time you create some new different energy with someone.
Yes. And it does it in a way that allows them to be exactly who they are supposed to be. And I think a lot of things focus so much on us being ourselves in a way that, we put up these boundaries and these, and this kind of like, there's a kind of a big F you to the other person, right? Like this human design teaches us that we are all created in a way that is unique and perfect. And wherever we're not acting in a way that reflects that, it's from a place of a wound. So why are we going, if someone is, we all see the movies where somebody horrible, like a person you've hated in the whole movie, is dying, right? Or they have something, and then all of a sudden your heart goes out and you're going to help them and you save them, right? Right? Because you're like, I don't want you to really die. But when people are wounding emotionally, we just are like, so I think human design allows us to see that we're all here to deal with our own story, but to hold space for people while they deal with their own, not to let the one, we're not going to let the person come in and, rewrite our story for us, but we're not here to rewrite theirs.
Right. And being clear that everybody, when my kids hate it, but no breakdown between two people is any one person's fault. Because at the very least, the person who's hurt, bothered, annoyed, or whatever could have chosen a different response, right? Even if the other person's a raging asshole and making really crappy choices, you could still choose to ignore it and not be bothered, right? You could still choose to refocus and recalibrate. I love to share resiliency and the resiliency keys with crowds that'll listen to me talk about it.
Mhm.
And how I frame it through the lens of my own personal transformation of trauma into triumph is that our life story is the sum result of every single thing that's happened to you, to me in the last 47 and a half years. But my personal narrative is what determines my experience, right? The story I'm telling myself and the rest of the world about every single thing that's happened to me. I don't recount every single thing that's happened to me, but for a large part of even my young adulthood, I defined who I was based on some very serious and significant trauma points in my life without acknowledging that there was all this other life that happened in between those trauma points that was not traumatic and actually quite supportive and very loving. And
Mhm.
so this has been the other really thing that drives my passion about sharing human design with people, is that if you're able to get clear on how you are in charge of your personal narrative, the life story is just the pool of juiciness you get to pull your experience from. It doesn't have to be the burden of whatever it is that happened, because I think we've all experienced traumas, big trauma, little trauma, however you want to define it. Trauma is traumatic. And if
Mhm.
it's a little trauma happening over the course of a long time, it turns into a big T trauma, right? And so many of us act like we're not living in reaction to our little traumas because we don't have a story about some big trauma, right? Or we're living this story of we have this big trauma that we have overcome, right? It's not a victimhood, but being a survivor still tethers you to the trauma.
Yeah.
Being victorious only tethers you to your victory. And that has been the absolute biggest game changer for me personally, is understanding I'm not going to get rid of those traumas. I'm not going to change those traumas. And as a matter of fact, I am very much a result of all of those traumatic experiences. And I'm also this other thing, and it can be whatever I choose it to be, because I hold the pen to create the story.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And there are people, I'm sure we all know the people who have had, yeah, terrible things that have happened in their life, and they just hold on to them. And to a certain degree, I know I've spoken with some people I know well who have those kinds of, I don't want to attach any kind of shame to this, because it's coming from a place of pain, right? But it's
Mhm.
they're holding on to the victim story because they don't feel seen in their.
Right.
And I have found so many times that when you look at your human design and you see, for example, something like, oh, well, you're a projector and you have not been seen because you're meant to be operating in a very different way than everyone's telling you you're meant to be operating, or you're a manifester who's been conditioned so deeply not to initiate, and you're like imploding almost with all this big energy, it's like all going inward. So when you can start to see how you're being told a story that is not true to who you are, it can really help to start to unpack that victim story in a way that's empowering and helps you to move forward. But the resiliency keys have been amazing. And Karen has 9 of them that she teaches. And that's part of the quantum alignment system. It's the tapping on those things. And that was huge for me to go through that.
It is so amazing when people realize that the story that they're living is one that they wrote when they were 3, because they overheard an adult conversation and misinterpreted it entirely.
Yeah.
Right? Like I spent a large portion of my life thinking that, and I'll just be frank since I've already been that way, that women were catty, jealous bitches and men were just easier to be friends with. And I thought that was my story. And that's sort of how I lived my life, especially in my 20s. And then I had some personal reflection and realized I had a lot of really close girlfriends who we would also sit around and kind of have this story with each other. But isn't it ironic that I'm having this conversation with other women, right? Like that felt very confusing, right? Out of alignment with that story I was living. And then in my 40s, when I did this really deep dive into my own who am I and how am I showing up in the world, turns out my 76-year-old mother had an experience with her classmate when she was 7, who was mean and jealous. And so my 7-year-old mother decided then that girls were jealous and mean and that boys were just easier to be friends with. And so then she went on and lived her whole life. And then she had a little girl named Leslie, and she told little Leslie that story. And so little Leslie went on and lived her life thinking that that was a truth, whatever that word means. And only in the last 10 years have I been able to unravel not my story and also not an aligned expression of who I am in any way, shape, or form. I am like the sister of the sisterhood. And also, I have a lot of really fantastic women in my life who have been there, some of them since I was 7. So how many of these other things are we living as a part of our true identity that really not even a story that little Leslie made, but a story that little Rosemary made, right? And
or even a story that has become, we now know that these things get encoded in our DNA. And so it might be
a story from my grandmother, who's a story from her grandmother, right? Yes, science would say not only it might be, science would say it's unequivocally a story I inherited from my great grandma.
Right.
Crazy to be aware of, and also, holy cow, how cool that I get to do something different for my daughter.
And as we change it for us, we change our own DNA.
Yes.
As it moves forward, and we change it for our children and for future generations. And so we are healing, right? Because we know that energy goes to the highest point, right? So I can't believe the way we have just been chatting, and I'm barely at the clock. And I just wanted to say that I know there's some people watching, and if anybody has any questions for Leslie, or for me about anything we've been talking about or anything just in general, go ahead and put them in the chat. But we've got about another 5 minutes here. So we pretty much have talked about the things. I know you said you talk a lot about the 5 kinds of integrity, that's something that you do a lot within your work. And I know Karen teaches that in relationship to gate 26, which is the gate of integrity. She teaches it in that aspect. And that is, so tell me how you use that in your work.
I love to operate as a motivational speaker too, just because, again, more people makes my little heart sing loudly. But one of the things that I think that we need to learn more about is how we are in integrity. And I do not have the gate 26 defined. So when I first started reading it, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense about a lot of my choices. But then when I actually learned, right, like integrity is about how are you in alignment with yourself in a physical way, and a resource way, in a identity way, and a moral way, and in an energetic way. And so many people just identify that moral integrity, and then they go and they eat a bunch of crap, or they don't sleep, or they spend more money than they have, and they think they're living in integrity, and then they have no idea where the misalignment is. It can be really confronting, for sure, to acknowledge where you're out of integrity in those 5 different areas in your life, but it can also be so empowering when you're honest with yourself about where you are depleting your vitality. Where are you spending?
What are the 5 again?
Physical integrity, resource integrity, identity integrity, moral integrity, and energetic integrity. Okay. And so that idea of where are you truly, where could you benefit from shoring up your choices and your behaviors? And for a lot of us, it happens in that physical and resource realm, right? We act like we're living on credit, and not just in a financial way, but in an energetic way. We're spending more than we have, and then we don't know why. We feel depleted. When we've made good choices and we are good people, well, that's your morality for sure. But if your physical integrity is depleted because you haven't eaten well, and you're not sleeping well, and you're, saying yes when you mean no, and no when you mean yes, a lot of things can feel upside down, when really it's a matter of shifting your perspective and understanding that the choices we make can pull us out of integrity as easily as the focus point that we have, right? If we're triangulating on the wrong goal, we end up in the wrong place. If we're focusing on our morality and we're forgetting to eat well, I would say we're not focusing on exactly where we need to focus. And so I think the integrity conversation can be really eye-opening. I work with entrepreneurs and parents, and so integrity and resiliency are two skill sets and understanding that I think are lacking for people and so beneficial.
So yeah, that's great stuff. I really I love the whole thing. And you do have all of the charts. So you have the full spectrum of that energy accessible to you. So it's great for where we're completely open is where we're meant to be wise. So you're clearly meant to be wise with that integrity. And you do have the other half pointing towards it. And it's between two open centers. So clearly you're going to be really drawn to that energy because it's going to define both your spleen and your will.
Electromagnetize me.
The one last thing I did want to touch on, since we don't have any questions at this point, is I'm really fascinated with this concept just in general. And I mentioned it to you when we were talking and you were like, oh, I hadn't thought about this. But you're a manifesting generator, but you have a split. So your generating channel and your manifesting channel do not talk to each other. You have your emotional solar plexus defined through the 36-35 to the throat. You also have the 20-43-23 to the throat from the ajna. So you got that genius to freak channel going on there. So that's one split. And then your other split is your root to the sacral, which is defined with two format energy channels, the 52-9 and the 53-42. So I'm trying to understand how that feels to you, because you'll have a sacral response, but you need to wait for clarity. And the sacral response and the emotional piece don't always talk to each other.
They don't always talk to each other. And it's been so insightful to have this lens of self-understanding about why they don't talk to each other.
Right? I'm
not hardwired for them to talk to each other, even though I benefit when they do talk to each other. When you said that, and it kind of sparked a little rabbit hole inquiry. It's actually quite interesting to look back on reflection, how the emotional throat ajna definition manifests in my life, and then how the root sacral, especially as the younger version of me, again, if it feels good right now, let's go do it. If we have the energy, with very little processing and very, very little riding of the full wave, even maybe rejecting the fact that there was a lower aspect to the wave, right? I think that's been really a keen awareness, that part of why I have this, I talk about the defined root is I'm not a procrastinator, I'm deadline oriented. If it's not time to take action, I don't need to take action. So if you give me a 3-day project and you give me 3 weeks to do it, I'll see you in 2.5 weeks when it's time to get started, is how that works. And so that's kind of how I feel on an intrinsic level. But obviously, as a contributing member of society, that's not always the best strategy to take action with. And so being really clear on, first of all, I can bridge that gap. So I can actually plug those things in to have a more complete personal awareness. But also, when I make those choices with the split and then find myself in that place where, oh, that probably would have been a different choice, probably would have landed me in a more beneficial place. I can give myself the grace and understanding of how I got there and how to do it differently next time. Again, back to that 3-line stuff, right? Like, I end up in some crazy places. I've obviously survived it, so I'm meant to, but also some of those places I don't ever need to revisit. And so being able to tap into that awareness, and I've got 7 splenic activations on an open spleen. So like my relationship with splenic energy is very dynamic.
The thing that stood out to me is that your bridging gate, okay, because you have this split that the one gate that if that's activated, that will bridge it is the gate 49, which is the gate of revolution in traditional human design. I forget the quantum name for it, but
Catalyst.
Catalyst, the gate catalyst. It's also known as the gate of marriage and divorce. So I think that that's interesting energy to have bridging your split during Venus retrograde, right?
Go sit
So,
in a cafe. I don't have to actually talk to the person that bridges my split.
right? This is true. Okay. All right. Well, listen, that's great. We're already a little over, but I really wanted to touch on that a little bit. And like always, I could sit here and talk for another, couple hours, but people need to get on with their day, right? So I wanted to thank you so much, Leslie. This has been really great I really appreciate you making the time for us. And I want to thank everybody who has joined us live, or also anyone who is catching this on the replay in the Intuitive Human Design Facebook group or later on YouTube. And I just wanted to say, Leslie, if people want to reach out to you in some way, will you put your contact stuff in the group? Is there a certain way?
Sure, I will share it in the group. My website is www.kaizenwellness.com, Kizen. And I'm on Facebook way too much, but all the time. So I'm always available.
Yeah, you post a lot. It's good stuff though. I'm always feeling intrigued.
It's one of my outlets for informing. My sacral says yes to Facebook a long time ago. It's how my husband and I found each other again. So
that's
I'm
awesome.
never deleting the app.
Right? Okay. So every week we share stories of how human design has helped people to tell a better story of who they are. And I think that Leslie has really showed a lot about how it's helped her to reshape her narrative and how she uses it to help other people reshape their narrative. And that's something that I always get really charged up about doing as well, because how you speak about yourself matters. And and so if you're interested in finding out how human design can show you a truer story of who you came here to be, reach out to me or to Leslie. And like we said, whoever you connect with, whatever it is, just you do you, right? There's plenty of people out there to connect with. If you don't resonate with one person, you resonate with another, or talk to us both.
So all of us, it's a party.
Right. I love getting different people's perspectives on different things. And it's just really a fun way to connect on all that. But I wanted to thank you again, and everybody have a great day. And we will see you next week. Elena Heim is going to be my guest. And so we'll do it a little bit later because of time zone issues. I believe we're doing it at 1:00 Eastern time. So we'll catch you next week.